research on scales that are related between the Western system and the Indian system and do a little presentation on that. And as I started getting into it, I realized like that there was more and more material in common than I was aware of. And so I've been trying to find out ways that we can kind of compare and contrast the systems and find some inroad to like the understanding of how the two can be related. Fundamentally, there's this difference in terms of the Western system being more of like a harmonic system, where we're always thinking about stacking notes on top of each other and creating chords, versus like in the Indian system where it's a melodic system. And the melody is moving like this, and there's always a constant drone, but there isn't the intention of having two or more of those notes happening at the same time, right? So in like the introduction to this, the first thing we might need to acknowledge is the difference in the way that the notes are being tuned. And that, I think, depending on the situation, what people are familiar with, that conversation looks a little bit different, right? So I think that everyone here is familiar with the way that the notes would be tuned when you're singing like one raga or another raga, and that each one of them has their very specific place for that rag that it needs to sit, right? Especially in relation to which note precedes it or will follow it. And those are always related to the drone. But in the Western system, because there is this harmonic system of stacking the notes, if you play all of these notes in exactly the place that they would be for one specific raga, then the chords would start sounding out of tune. And that's where this part of this system has developed, of what we call the equal temperament system, as opposed to the just intonation system that happens in India. So in the Western system, we have it where all the notes are exactly the same distance apart from each other when you go up in this scale. If I were to take this scale from here, C, up to C here, if I play this on a piano, right? This is a development where every one of these intervals from one fret to the next one should be exactly the same. And what that means is that on a piano, I can play in any key. I can play in the key of C, I can play in the key of F sharp, I can play in the key of E flat, and it will sound equally in tune. In fact, in a way, it sounds equally out of tune, because because if you were to sing any of these ragas or play them off of those notes, it will sound equally a little bit out of tune. But if we want to make chords out of these things, out of these note structures, then they'll all work. So going from that, when we acknowledge that difference, right? So if we talk about common scales, we're not necessarily going to say that they're always going to sound exactly the same if someone in New York is playing them versus here in Gangtok, right? But you can find that there are a lot of similarities. For example, if we both have this common scale that will be like the major scale or the Shuddha scale, and that's common throughout the entire world. But in the Western system, we have a way of looking at things where we create modes. Like we love to have these systems that are very logical, and you can find a place where they start, and you can see how it went from one step to the next, right? So I can take a C major scale and I can play that, and I can go like this. Which could be similar to like Bilawal scale or something. If I start on the next note, if I start on D and I go up to the next D and come back down, I'm still using the exact same notes as what I just played, but it'll sound different. That would be what we would call the Dorian mode, but you could say that this is the same notes as coffee, If I start on the third note, I can create what would be called the Phrygian mode. Is this sounding familiar? I could go to the fourth one, Lydian mode. Or this. Right? What if I start on the fifth one, I make the Mixolydian scale? Maybe this is descending though, only descending, right? What about this? Aeolian mode. I heard Ashalari. And this last one, I don't know if we have an equivalent. We call this Locrian mode. So all of these, we have equivalents in both of these systems, and they're all very commonly used in both of the systems. One thing that I noticed is there's a little bit of a difference, maybe it's just in the categorization. The fact that we would take all of these modes could be a basis of things, but they all descend from the same place, as opposed to the system of classification of tots that's happening over here, that each one of these is kind of creating, it's a different world on its own. You can't take all of them and squash them into like one cohesive thing. So you can mix and match little pieces of them, but the way that they're classified is like a little bit of a different way of looking at it. And then of course, you do have some scales that don't overlap. I haven't found any equivalent in the Western system of like I don't know if that's or in the West we might make a scale like this. Anybody know the name of that one? Whole tone scale. If someone can tell me a Rag equivalent of this one, I would love to know. Or another one similar to that that's also symmetrical. This is a diminished. Which one? So that's also what we would call a diminished scale. So this is some of the area that I'm exploring, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them or talk later if anyone has any ideas or things coming off of this. Food for thought.